Hello there, this is Steve here in Sydney of the Lay and Moses website, truebluehealer.com, where in just 20 minutes, doing the beginner's tour, you can get physical evidence that your divine spark is being activated, and you'll be getting some vivid messaging dreams in just a few days, and ultimately you'll get an internal mentoring voice, and after just a few weeks you'll realise that you are surrounded by sleepwalkers, okay? And you'll have to forgive people for being so off the rails because they're not even born yet, okay? So it makes you a lot more forgiving toward people's obvious social transgressions. But at the moment the transgressions seem near overwhelming. I'm going to talk about that, but there's a very welcome development just landed in our laps in Sydney, Australia. The welcome presence of Pauline Hanson has arrived in the Senate. That's the upper house in our federal parliament. She's gotten with a considerable number of votes from a lot of very concerned citizens. And as a result of the publicity given to her due to this, the very left-wing ABC show, that's the equivalent of the BBC, a completely stacked meeting which was organised as a bear pit to throw Pauline Hanson into, was organised, and it's called Q&A, comes on 9:30, and even the moderator is mocking her, introducing irrelevant things that are so stupid it's beyond belief. But I'm deeply disappointed in Tony Jones for being so derisive toward her. He's supposed to be the adjudicator, the moderator, the presenter of the show. The whole panel of people, there's only one decent person on the whole panel, and that's Nick Xenophon from South Australia. He's a very canny, smart, independent politician who's respected by everybody in the community. He's balanced, thoughtful, intelligent, good in interviews, and good at making decisions in Parliament. He's very experienced at getting the best out of the two major parties as an independent. All the other people are left-wing loonies, and at the beginning of the show, it'll be available for about 2 weeks, this show. You can watch it from the ABC's website. Then it will disappear, and I think I'll have a copy saved up, and I'll tell you where to get it later if you want to look at it. But in just the first 10 minutes, Sam Dastyari is a left-wing loony Labor politician who talks about wanting to see things in black and white, and he believes everything written in black and white on her website. And he's decided to denounce her first up, like the first kick in the football match. Kick-off time, you start off by kicking Pauline Hanson. And Sam Dastyari is a curious fellow. He's one of those pseudo-Muslims that we all see walking about everywhere. You assume he's Muslim because he's got Middle Eastern appearance, you see. And he challenges, attacks Pauline Hanson with some rhetorical questions, and just plain out and out name calling her racist over and over again, which is the progressive loony left cat call to close down everybody. Nobody should speak about groups of humans in any way, shape or form because it's racist, you see. Well, Western world is being destroyed by that immature, infantile philosophy of never been allowed to talk in groups, you see. Now, Pauline Hanson is prepared also, and she says, "Oh, are you Muslim?" in a very sort of innocent tone, and he rolls up laughing, ha 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 ha. The whole audience joins in the laughter, the peanut gallery, and he thinks it should be obvious just because he's got the face, you see, the Middle Eastern appearance. And he's got this big rhetorical question. Do you mean to say to stop all Muslims, you would have stopped me coming in 28 years ago to Australia? And a big wound-up rhetorical question. How dare you do this, you know? Look at me, I'm in front of you now, face to face. How dare you? Would you stop me coming to Australia as a refugee? My persecuted parents had to leave Iran. And Pauline Hanson handles him with considerable style. She just says, I'm not talking about 28 years ago. I just said in my introduction, I'm talking about the last 10, 15 years. So I'm not talking about you at all. So he instantly went to the professional victim mode of so many left-wing people. And the other notable thing was, it's kind of obvious, she was trying to set him up to show that he was a pseudo-Muslim. Because although he's a politician, he's not very good at handling questions, and he will not admit to being a practicing Muslim. He's a pseudo-Muslim. He expects his appearance to be his pass card to get him everywhere. So she just keeps quietly asking him, "Are you a Muslim? Are you Muslim?" And he ultimately escapes the question by laughing. "Ah, ha, 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 I don't think you're taking this very seriously." He says, he's laughing. "You're not taking this seriously." Well, he doesn't answer the question for the duration of the TV show, the 1-hour program grilling Pauline Hanson. And it just gets worse after that. The left-wing loonies, the left-wing audience, they start abusing her, calling her racist and divisive, and they talk as if, quite seriously, she's responsible for the Islamic attack on the Western world, orchestrated by George Soros and the Arab states. They really, I mean, that's how infantile they are. People in the audience are reading out prepared questions, calling her names, rhetorical questions they don't want her to answer. And the show just gets worse and worse and worse. And overall, considering it's such a hostile audience, such a bear pit, she's handled herself rather well, considering Pauline Hanson is not at all educated. She's not a very good debater. She's not a very good presenter. She has an unattractive, sort of grating voice. She's not a nice talking head to listen to at all. Yet, what she says quietly in reply and keeps restating all makes sense, common sense, that applies to normal people. But the whole show, audience and the panel, is stacked with left-wing lunatics, with the exception of Nick Xenophon, the independent from South Australia. So, this is a very welcome development. She's got automatic nationwide publicity, and she's being watched from all over the world. Her television shows are being watched from all over the world. And if she ever gets this Royal Commission up, it will have a very valuable benefit to Muslims. She was never allowed to get this sort of thing out. She really needs to have a more sophisticated description on her website of the benefits of a Royal Commission into Islam for Muslims, to finally explain their own Quran to them, because Islam's greatest enemy is its own Quran. It's full of mistakes, breaks in the narrative, logical failures, total absurdities. So I would imagine in the very beginning with Sam Dastiari, Pauline Hanson would have had a couple of gotcha questions for him had he admitted to being a Muslim, because I know he's not a Muslim. I can guarantee the way he wouldn't answer the question, he was avoiding being asked directly, "Can you explain something in the Quran?" Because I know he can't, as most Muslims can't. Gotcha questions that you can have, I'll show you links for them. They're explained by a fellow called David Wood. He reads out the Quran in studious detail, shows you the verses on camera, and he explains to you that, for example, here's a question you can put to any Muslim. I want to hear Pauline Hanson doing this too, but a question you could put to a Muslim: why does the Quran have 23 references about Mohammed wearing women's dresses? 23 references to him wearing women's dresses, for goodness sake. And there's an explanation of that. His 9 wives complained. He had 10 wives total. His favourite was Aisha, the youngest. And he only got good reception for his revelations when he was wearing Aisha's dresses. Can you believe that was his answer when 9 of the wives lined up to condemn him for showering gifts on Aisha? That was his half-baked one-line answer. But it's recorded in the Quran as a serious answer from the Prophet. Now, as a result of that, Pakistani men today dance in Bollywood dresses. Okay? Because there is really no interpretation of the Quran. You've got to emulate the Prophet's life. That includes killing the unbeliever, and that's why we have so many stabbings and axe attacks in Germany. Did you hear about the Afghan who axed 27 people in a German train carriage? And he was shot a few minutes later by the local police. That's going all over the world. And the left-wing people on this show, this Pauline Hanson show, all wanted to sweep it under the carpet and say, "You're just being racist. Racist, all the time." So they just use playground taunts to try and close down discussion on this very serious life and death matter. We're talking about the life and death of Western civilization. Okay, now, and to her credit, Pauline Hanson stood up and said, There's Muslims in my own party voting to stop Muslim immigration. I know Muslims personally who say it's got to be stopped because we're bringing in too many loonies mixed in with them. Their children grow up to become jihadis. That's the problem. The first generation are okay. It's their children growing up who cannot adapt to a modern society. And here's a welcome piece of news for you. In Sydney, there's some people, African people, who were let in here because they lied to the immigration department and said they were oppressed back in Somalia, and they got residency in Australia for 500 people. They just lied to our Australian embassy officials over there, and so that we couldn't be called racist, we let them all into Australia. And now the crime rate is so high, most of them are in jail, a lot of them are in jail, and one of them has got, a young man, he's got so many charges against him, he faces 20 years in jail in Australia. So his parents are trying to get him sent back to Africa where it's okay to behave like a wild animal, okay? To get him out of a jail sentence, they're going to send their eldest son back to Africa where it's okay to continuously offend. There is no law and order back in Somalia. So were they genuine refugees in the first place when they want to send their crazy, mad, psychopathic son back to the land they were fleeing? Just think about that. That's in on the news today in Sydney. So putting people back where they come from might be a good idea for other people who can't fit into civilised society, eh? Wonderfully rapid, high-speed developments occurring since Pauline Hanson has come to the fore by being elected for a 6-year term in the Australian Upper House. Just about every Muslim you meet is a pseudo-Muslim, meaning they never read the Quran. Maybe we should start that off as a meme going around like racist. We have to invent the term pseudo-Muslim because they're only Muslims in name, they never read the Quran. There's a few reasons why. One of them is the 3 books, which are the Sirat, the Hadith and the Quran, total about 2,000 pages. So it's quite an intellectual task, and the average person today with a job somewhere hasn't got the time to read a nearly 2,000 page triplet of books. And you go, how's it going to change my life? I have a factory job, I drive a car, I go to work, I do this, I've got a family to raise. Why would I read a 2,000 page book that doesn't tell me anything about modern times? So, and then there's the fact that all their knowledge of the Quran depends entirely on what they've been told they've heard word of mouth from an imam who makes things up. But there's more reform on the way. This is a welcome measure. In Egypt now, the government is now putting out weekly sermon sheets to be read out loud at every Friday prayer meeting at every mosque in Egypt, which means you can't just walk out of the mental hospital across the road and preach on Fridays at the mosque. That's a very welcome development. Islam is being reformed, and the problem has been that it has no leadership, no official modern doctrine, and the Egyptian government is simply providing it by force. So if someone's finally had enough and they're doing something that governments have to do, only governments can do these sorts of things. And strangely, there hasn't been many complaints. Just about 3 complaints from lunatic Muslim preachers, fire and brimstone, hellfire, damnation people. Okay? So, to eliminate them will be a very positive thing for Egypt. Now, how long the Egyptians can keep doing that, I don't know. Fingers crossed it goes on for years, and the next government and the next government after that will have the common sense and the wisdom to keep the weekly government preaching sheet going to every mosque to control what's said to the masses. Okay? More gotcha questions you can hit Muslims with to unmask them as pseudo-Muslims, and maybe they should stop impersonating Muslims, is ask them to talk about the leading man in the Quran, the Prophet, the great Prophet that they all worship and name their children after. That's been made illegal, by the way, in Uzbekistan. You can't call your child Mohammed anymore. If you knew anything about Mohammed, you wouldn't name your children after him. He was a murderer extraordinaire, often killing 900 people a day, right? So things like that. Now, one of the things you can ask a pseudo-Muslim is say, well, how did how did Muhammad actually die? Surely the death of your prophet, you would know about the circumstances surrounding his death. I mean, did he die in his sleep? Did he die in battle? What happened? Well, the truth was, his death was predicted by the spirits, Allah or something, speaking as we. I don't know why Allah is identified as we, as being a system of spirits or something. They actually advise in advance that if he dies a certain way that they describe in some detail, if he dies this way, that will prove he's a false prophet. And he does die the way as described precisely by the spirits in advance. He does die that way. And thus that, he talks about his aorta being cut or constricted or something. After he's been poisoned by a Jewish woman, she bakes him a leg of lamb which is poisoned after Muhammad has just slaughtered everyone in the village. She's one of the few women left. She's now a sex slave. And she poisons him. And after eating the poison, he complains about his aorta being affected the very way that the spirits predicted. Thus, the Quran certifies Muhammad as a false prophet and the whole book as a false holy book. Now, that proves that Muslims never read the Quran. Do you understand the significance of this? I would just love to hear Muhammad described in this way. Pauline Hanson should be able to put this question to all these professional pseudo-Muslims in the audience of these idiotic talk shows where the left-wing loonies congregate to hurl insults at her, calling her a racist. What would you call a pseudo-Muslim who doesn't know anything about his religion? Goodness gracious, you must be able to think of a few names for that. A common claim by Muslims who believe all the mythology they hear word of mouth is that the Quran has never changed and it's an ancient book, totally unchanged. Well, Aisha changed the Quran. This is actually written in the Quran. When Muhammad died, under his pillow, Aisha says that a tame sheep came in and ate the manuscript about that Muhammad had given the ruling that if a man has to be alone with a married woman while her husband's out working, looting, raping and pillaging, what has the wife got to do? Well, Muhammad said she has to breastfeed the male visitor 10 times. Okay? That's seriously written in the Quran. So you can ask people about when they say the Quran is unchanging, it's the ultimate final word of God, it's the last holy book, you've got to become Muslim whether you like it or not. You just say, well, tell me about the bit about breastfeeding men at home. Grown women have to breastfeed grown men while their husbands are away. It's in the Quran, and Aisha had that manuscript eaten by sheep. So Aisha changed the Quran. And in fact, there are whole chapters missing from the Quran and chapters added to the Quran by dozens and dozens of backyard plagiarists and imitators and falsifiers over the next 200-300 years. The first Quran was ever put together by Uthman in about 705. It's radically different to the Quran of the 10th and 11th century that they now use today. So it's changed a lot since its inception in 705. Okay? So you can put these sort of gotcha questions to the average Muslim and you'll always get a blank stare. Okay? Because they only think they're Muslim because they listen to what they are told. They are told they are Muslims by the preacher on Fridays, by their mother and father, by everyone around them. You must be Muslim because you were born to those Muslim people. Yet none of them know anything about the Quran. So the greatest enemy of Islam is the Quran itself. It's an utter forgery, a complete mockery, and self-certifies itself as a fake holy book with a fake prophet. And it's written in the Quran if you just take the time to read it. I'll give you videos about this. There's a man who explains it to you, David Wood. He's very good. And you can't seriously believe this is a real religion if you read it. Many Muslims reading the Quran for the first time in the Western world they become apostates instantly. They go atheists straight away, right? Anything but Islam. ISIS apparently drives a lot of Muslims to leave Islam because they're horrified to find that what ISIS does is taken literally from the Quran, and they do copious references to the Quran explaining why they behead, crucify, burn people alive and saw them in half, because it's all in the Quran, you see. This horrifies a lot of Muslims into abandoning Islam, because it is in the Quran, everything that ISIS do. Okay? And the only reason it's a big shock to them is they've never read the Quran before, these pseudo-Muslims that are flooding the Western world. Most of them can't even read. So Pauline Hanson wants a royal commission to expose the main content of the Quran to everybody, to the light of day, so that Muslims get educated about what they believe in, so they will leave Islam in droves, and that is a reformation of Islam. Because they're going to have to call themselves neo-Muslims or new Muslims or better Muslims or something. A new kind of Muslims got to be generated by the understanding of what the old book is really about. And Pauline Hanson has started the process off with a bang. Steve here in Sydney, over and out.